Hello and welcome to Health Matters on Channels Television. We are so glad you could join us. I am Mary Alale Yusuf. Substance abuse is the harmful use of drugs that affect the mind. Every year, alcohol abuse causes 3.3 million deaths, according to the World Health Organization. Global deaths from use of illicit drugs is put at about 190,000 yearly by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. The use of psychoactive substances, that's substances that alter the mind, causes health and social problems. The World Health Organization estimates that almost 1% of the global disease burden in 2004 was owing to cocaine and opioid use. Substance abuse also results in a significant financial burden on nations. My guest is the medical director of Tranquil and Quest Nigeria, a branch of Tranquil and Quest New Jersey, USA. Dr. Otefe Edebi is a consultant psychiatrist and psychologist. You are welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mary.
Let's start this way. Now, obviously, people taking drugs are under some sort of illusion. And you have told me that most of the drug information comes from the suppliers. So what is it that they say to make people take drugs?
Well, they say a lot of things. It's like they are good psychologists, if I would put it that way. They understand their bias. They look for words that will match whatever the buyers need. So if someone says, I can't study, I can't concentrate, the seller wants to tell him that the drug will help him do all that. So they just tell you anything you want to hear, whatever suits your fancy. But it's beyond what they say to them that make them buy the drugs. It is also actually, like you rightly mentioned, the argument now is that, the statement now is that drug addiction is as a result of chronic drug use alters the brain structure and function, which thereby causes some form of compulsion, poor judgment. So it's beyond just what the seller tells them, is that there is a strong compulsion on the side of the user to continue using the drug.
Okay, we know that these drugs affect the mind, but are there other things they do, other effects, as it were, on the person?
I always like to use the word direct and indirect effects. It affects the brain. It changes the function and the structure. It also affects other parts of the human body. Alcohol is well-known fact to affect the liver, which can lead to various forms of liver diseases. And it affects various organs in the body beyond the liver. Cigarettes is known to affect the lungs. I mean, we hear the popular language, smokers are liable to die young. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of effect. I mean, heroin users, particularly pentazocine, which is kind of common here in Nigeria.
It's common?
Yeah, kind of common, yes, because quite a number of people, and I think it's also important to say that it's not as if people who abuse drugs are always, morally
have poor moral judgments.
Yes. It's not always as a result of that. Sometimes it could be various reasons lead to drug addiction. That's why the argument is that it's a brain disease. It's not just that the person chooses to be in that state. I mean, some people have started abusing drugs as a result of, it started out as a medical prescription.
Yes.
Then they became hooked on it. So it's not like the person went out, to abuse drugs. Some people started out of curiosity. Some people use those same drugs and never got hooked. So it's not a function of just their moral standard. And I was talking about pentazocine. I mean, chronic use of pentazocine leads to remarkable ulcers, body ulcers. I mean, you will have somebody with that is hooked on pentazocine having all sorts of body ulcers on
outward ulcers.
Yes, very deep ones, very deep, sometimes bone-revealing ulcers, yet they will persist in their use. Now that's about the effect on the body. Yes. Then we go about effects on their finances. I mean, a lot of people who are hooked have to spend a lot of money on this, and regardless of the harm it is causing to their finances, they persist. Some of it lead to other kind of risk. Alcohol, I mean, it's said to be a major factor in suicide. A lot of people who commit suicide, about one third to one fourth of them, as associated with alcohol use, at least at the point of committing suicide. Yeah, so it affects.
Yes, they persist.
Yes. So
do we have, of course, the pentazocine thing you told me is a very good outward sign.
Yeah.
But do we have other outward signs, mannerisms, or maybe the look of the person that shows that something might be happening?
Well, it depends on the drug of use. I mean, for the popular one, cannabis, which is quite popularly used, is associated with redness of eyes. Then you also have darkening of the lips. So those are some signs that both for a professional and a user can identify someone else who uses, when they see all those mannerisms. Then there are also, of course, there are changes in behavior that comes as a result of addiction. There's decrease in certain activities. So the individual may not be that involved in things that are things that they are supposed to be responsible.
At this point, do the users begin to realize that they've lost control?
Yes, they do. Sometimes they try to remember. Part of what it impacts on is their judgment. So their judgment is a bit impaired. They realize that, I'm not functioning optimally, but sometimes they excuse themselves. They say, okay, I'm not hooked, and they give all sorts of reasons and all that. But it's a compulsion. It's a feeling. Someone who has not gone through it may not fully appreciate what they go through.
How strong it can be.
The feeling is. I mean, I've met people who, I know a particular person, lovely individual, very lovely individual personality. When the compulsion came on to take alcohol, the person literally, went over the fence